Secretary of State for giving way. He's making a wonderful speech about the 1980s. Whilst I agree with him on many of the points he's making, the truth today is this country's come a long way in all sorts of sectors, and I'm proud to have done my bit on it. I want to ask about regulation. He, I know, agrees with me that actually leadership in regulating the new industries, sandboxes, test beds, is a great UK strength. He also wants us to get closer to the European market. Is he worried that in doing that, we may end up losing the competitive advantage, say, in agri-tech, in gene editing, in a number of areas where we could genuinely attract investment to new industries? I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for giving way. He's making a really important point about regulation in Northern Ireland. Having championed in government the gene editing bill to give this country the ability to grow disease-resistant, drought-resistant crops, the potato that typically requires 14 applications of high-carbon toxic fungicide can be grown with Norwich technology without. Does he agree with me? It's quite a big opportunity for Northern Ireland. It could be growing those potatoes without the fungicide, with huge environmental benefits, but under the European bill, Northern Ireland will be denied that opportunity.
I will happily give way.
I'm very grateful to her giving way. As the former Minister for the MHRA, she's making a really important point. Traditionally, the MHRA's influence has been in denying proper companies permission. It seems to me now, in a digital age, we have a different problem, which is people coming up with rubbish and selling it over the counter and unofficially digitally. Do we not need a much more powerful set of legal and financial disincentives to really hammer people who are selling these sort of products?
George Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There is no more important issue for the country than the stubbornly low growth rate and the structural barriers to the growth, productivity, enterprise, innovation and investment which this country so desperately needs, and which in truth has defied successive governments since the coalition, and the political crisis that the Brexit of 2016 unleashed. And it gives me no pleasure, speaking for my constituents in mid-Norfolk, to highlight that for them the King's speech is irrelevant unless they see real delivery on the ground. And what is happening in mid-Norfolk at the moment is small businesses on whom we rely shedding jobs, disposable incomes falling, market towns and high streets like Dereham, Watton and Attleborough struggling, pubs closing, farmers going out of farming food to take the government's incentives to farm solar panels and commuter housing estates, and public services overwhelmed by rising demand from new housing and ageing population. And this is fueling a surge in political anger, which is what explains a lot of the results in the elections last week across Suffolk, Norfolk, the Fens of Cambridgeshire, Lincolnshire, rural deprivation and rural poverty, and the disproportionate impact of high energy prices on the rural economy. Every cup of coffee, every school book, every pencil, every lesson, every journey costs, take the Treasury figures, 20% more than in cities, and yet rural areas are underfunded. That is driving real anger. And they're based on real grievances. People are now paying European levels of tax for American levels of public services, and they're fed up. And unless we, this government, this Parliament, this media, this Whitehall, respect and understand the grievance, set out a truly bold plan to deal with it, I fear we're going to see a continued rise of the rich in this country leaving, the middle classes concluding that the engine of growth, it's just not worth putting in the work they've been used to putting in, and the poor turning to the black market and to crime. I'll happily give way.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. For that to happen, governments and Parliament had to take back control. And successive governments have divested themselves of that control, as Simon Case said when he left office, by giving more power to unelected and unaccountable bodies of all kinds and types. So government to act needs levers to pull to make the kind of difference he's described, and governments have less and less ability to do that, and yet the King's speech doesn't address that fundamental need for a change of direction.
George Freeman.
He makes an important point. The King's speech my constituents loved was the King's speech in Washington, in which he spoke for the very best of this country. And the point I'm trying to make today is it is in all of our interests here, I say this as a friend of mainstream politics and democracy, that we tackle this challenge more boldly. And I welcome the speed with which newly elected Labour MPs have realised the scale and urgency of the problem of public and voter anger, stubbornly slow growth, rising unemployment, and demand for public services exceeding capacity. But they're in danger of going for the wrong prescription. What we need is a renaissance of enterprise and innovation across the public and private sectors. And convenient though it may be politically for my party, the idea that a regicidal political crisis of infighting and a leadership contest in office is the answer is for the birds. Take it from me, my party has tested that idea to destruction, and we've all paid the price. We don't need a Labour Party beauty contest. We need a parliament and a government that get more urgent about the many laudable things they've set out to do, but we don't have 10 years to deliver it. We have a couple of years. If the Labour Party knifes this Prime Minister, I suggest he's going to be the 7th who will have been got rid of because of the structural deficit. And I remember when I first arrived here in 2010, the brilliant Paul Johnson at the IFS explaining what the structural deficit was. It's worth repeating. The deficit normally is when a government doesn't earn as much as it's spending because the economy's taken a downturn, it borrows a bit to keep spending and then pays it back. The structural deficit is that bit of the deficit that goes up every year, even when the economy is growing. And it's driven by 4 things. In 2010, it was being driven by welfare, public sector pensions, and the big one, health, and debt interest was remarkably low. It's now, after the coalition, we capped off the rise in public sector pensions incredibly painfully. We capped off the rise in welfare incredibly painful. Health has continued to defy reform, and it is bankrupting the public sector. We're now spending over 50% on health and welfare and social support. It's simply not affordable. The only way out of this, you can't cut, borrow, or tax your way out of this. The only way out is to grow, and not through just dumping cheap housing across the countryside, but backing the industries of tomorrow. I'll happily give way to my...
I'd like to press my honourable friend a little further, because the other way of dealing with it, as I said earlier, is through improved productivity. So he's right, of course, that the burden of cost is fundamentally important, but it can be made better through greater efficiency. Indeed, the government themselves have said this, as successive governments have. But you have to put in place measures, and they are tough measures very often, to deliver that kind of productivity.
He makes an important point. I'm going to make a slightly different point, which is there are huge opportunities for really good growth in this country. Having had a 16-year career backing the industries of tomorrow, whether it's in fusion, in SMR, nuclear technologies, in agri-tech, in bioscience, the bioeconomy on Teesside, the satellite economy in Glasgow, we have an opportunity to turn these into the industries of tomorrow. And I welcome the government's industrial strategy commitment to do it. But it is at 50,000 feet. We need to drop down to some more tangible and bolder policies to back those industries. But I'm very proud, having come here, that the last government, I know the Secretary of State gave a tub-thumping speech about the 1980s, but the truth is we have made a lot of progress over the last 20 years. I was doing my work as Minister for Life Science, Minister for Agri-Tech, and Minister for the Science and Technology, following in the footsteps of Paul Drayson and David Sainsbury. In life science, in fusion, in AI, in quantum, we have built an unbelievably competitive economy. But other countries are moving fast. Our competitors are more agile. We are terrible at adopting technology in the public services. Our scale-ups are not getting the finance they need in the city. Kate Bingham in the Times today is right. How do we unlock this? Well, I want to suggest my 10-point plan for renewal, and I support the government's ambition. I say this because if we, all of us, fail, the benches over here of pub populists promising everything will win, and we will see even deeper disillusionment. So I'm calling in this speech for 1, real honesty of a 1979 scale about the scale of the emergency. 2, bold devolution to the people, cities, mayors that know how to do it better. Frankly, they couldn't do worse than Whitehall. 3, serious Whitehall reform so we end the juvenile process of HMT playing departments off against each other for funding that in the end comes very late and then is taken back. 4, a serious backing for the innovation economy, allocating the 20 billion of R&D. I welcome it, but how we allocate it is key. We need to allocate it in a way that attracts private investment. 5, a bold revolution of tax incentives for enterprise, a new deal for new business. No NI, no VAT if you're starting a company and growing for a couple of years. 5, regulation for innovation. Not just cutting regulations, but leading in setting the regulation. I welcome the government's work in setting up the Regulatory Innovation Office. Skills and patriotic capitalism. I don't think it's communism to get the city investing in British business. Boldness will win.